Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal. As usual, I am Andrew Berkshire, and the Montreal Canadiens have dropped another one, their second straight, but as has been the case for most of this season, I think they played their opponents pretty tight tonight. Defensively, there were some hiccups, to say the least. Jake Allen absolutely held them in there, but overall, I think they, had their chances. They played pretty well. The power play is still terrible, but, a muffed penalty shot, and this game could be tied. So it's an interesting situation for the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to talk about the power play because it's a continuing source of conversation. We're going to talk about Cole Caufield. I think he had a big bounce back game tonight. And we're going to talk about Caden Cooley as well, because there's been a growing conversation about Caden Cooley that by the eye test, he looks great. But by the underlying numbers, it ain't so great. So we're going to talk to a big Caden Cooley aficionado tonight. It's perfect timing because Mitch Brown is going to join us. But first, I got to tell you about Sports Interaction. You want to bet? You can do it at Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook. Football continues, the World Series is around the corner, and they've dropped the puck on the hockey season. Bet pregame, live in play, or on one of our many prop bets, like, the Cole Caufield to outscore Austin Matthews bet. Looking pretty good right now, 5-1 is the score, but Matthews has a lot of time to catch up. Made for Canadians, by Canadians, Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Ontario only, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. So let's welcome in Mitch Brown from Elite Prospects. Mitch, how's your evening going?
It's going well. Montreal Canadiens are not very good, but they are extremely entertaining to watch. This is how tanking should be done, folks.
Yeah, it is 100% true. I absolutely love watching the team this year, especially compared to last year. It's a breath of fresh air. I didn't think that they were going to be this fun this year, just as you look at those four rookies on defense, and I think everyone expected them to be a lot worse, but it seems like they're holding the fort relatively well. Obviously, there's some issues defensively, but let's start with Caden Cooley because I think he's such a big conversation point on this defense core. A lot of people see him as the future number one of this team. And obviously he's playing that position now at 20 years old, which is a lot to ask from anyone. Like, people forget that, like, PK Subban, when he was 20, started on the third pair with guys like Hal Gill. It wasn't immediate that he was moved up to the first pairing. Even halfway through that season, I believe Roman Hamrlik was still getting more ice time than he was. So it's a tough role that he's being put into. How do you see Caden Cooley right now?
Well, the first thing is that he's a young guy playing against top competition. He played 9.5 minutes against Kaprizov tonight. Got caved in most of those, but I also thought he did a pretty good job in some instances. So, high level of competition. This is a guy who is very much learning on the job when it comes to making plays with the puck, when it comes to activating and showing all the cool things that Martin St. Louis teams do. So it is going to require a lot of work. Also, something that is a little bit minor but interesting is that Goalie in the NHL doesn't have quite the same level of physical advantage over opponents in the WHL. In the WHL, there's a problem. Well, he can just hit it. The guy's not going to be able to get up for a little while afterwards, so he just run through him. In the NHL, he can't do that. He can't just problem solve via attempted murder. He actually has to go out there and try to angle, push players to the boards, lead with a stick, cut off their hands, move the puck. And so he's actually done a really good job at that for the most part. I think there will always be a part of Goalie that's just going to default to being very aggressive. And as he gets older, as he times better, the defense is going to improve. He's going to start making more plays on the defensive end. He's going to get caved in less. And I guess there's one last thing, and that is that him and David Savard do not work together.
This is a thing, coming into the preseason, there was a lot of Montreal media, and they do this every year. And I don't mean to call people out, but, guys get put together and they say like, oh, well, the young player has talked about how much the veteran had helped them, and that may be true, and like how much they learn from playing with them, that may also be true, but it doesn't mean it actually works on the ice. And this is definitely one of those situations where it's I guess the best of a bad situation, but I don't know what they can do other than throw another rookie on there with Cooley, which is probably not what they want to do. They could try to split up Harris and Kovacevic, but I feel like that pairing has been so good that you don't really want to mess with it. And the other option is like Jacky, and yes, that would be the most violent pairing in the NHL. It would be extremely fun. Would it be good? Probably not.
Yeah, and when the best guy on your blue on a pairing at moving the puck out of his zone, it's Caden Cooley. You might run into a few issues, and that is not like Caden Cooley has improved a lot at moving the puck. I mean, even tonight in a game where he was hemmed in his own zone a lot, he's not just dumping the puck anymore. He's trying to make plays. He waits, he draws the first forechecker, he tries to pass through them, he makes all sorts of little like indirect plays. And if he doesn't have a teammate, he just kind of leaves the puck in space and lets a teammate skate into it rather than hammering it off the glass and out. So this is a guy who has the tools. He clearly has the coachability and the willingness to learn, and he's trying his best to make things happen out there. So I think regardless of what the stats say, I'm a stats nerd, unfortunately. But I'm just going to pretend that they don't exist here. Caden Cooley actually rules, and stats are wrong. Y'all are haters. That's all.
I mean, that's basically what I've been saying about this season so far, right? Is like, I'm a stats guy, but I'm kind of ignoring the stats for a lot of this roster because obviously Cooley and guys like Suzuki and Caufield, the things that they're being asked to do this year are not the same as what it would be in a normal year where they're competing for a good team, right? Like Suzuki's taking top matchups while also being told you have to produce 80% of the offense on this team. It's not an easy thing to do. And obviously, in order to produce some of that offense, you're going to cheat a little. And him and Caufield have cheated quite a bit. I thought Suzuki actually had a bit of a struggle tonight with the puck. Like some really bad forced plays I found where he was trying to find somebody who wasn't there or waiting too long. But I did think that, I just realized I forgot to turn my lights all the way on. I did think that Caufield had a really big bounce game. We'll get to that later. But about Caden Cooley and David Savard, one thing that I do notice with them, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Mitch, but though they're giving up a metric ton of chances overall, it seems to me like one of those things that XG struggles to capture very well is like how much time and space players have to shoot. And while they're getting passes through, there's usually a stick in the way. There's usually pressure on the shooter. So they're doing little things that probably would limit the actual expected goals a little bit compared to what we're seeing from like a public domain website.
Yes, exactly. That is a great point. And part of what makes Cooley so effective in the NHL right now is that he's able to close space so easily. Like some players will have a huge amount of ice and they won't be able to recover. Cooley just takes one stride, one crossover. He gets a stick on the puck, deflects it, or at the very least, he forces another decision. Now, the tricky thing with this Minnesota Wild team is like, oh, you forced Kirill Kaprizov to pass instead of shoot, and he passed to Matt Boldy. And it's like, okay, well, it's not gonna, it doesn't change it that much, especially when your forwards are a little chaotic and your defensive partner spends a lot of time on his knees in the defensive zone trying to intercept passes that are never going to come. So yeah, it's they do have a lot of interesting qualities. I think Cooley, especially, like he's shown a lot in the NHL already. I think Savard, I mean, he does have some skill as well in the offensive end. You see him like jump in from the point, trying to make things happen. And the best part of this all is that, hey, I mean, it makes it easier to get Connor Bedard, doesn't it?
I mean, you would think so, but then you've got the Vancouver Canucks who are going for their hometown boy real hard. Maybe not on purpose, but it's happening.
They don't even realize that this was not the plan.
It's like the management team wanted to compete this year, and the players are like, you know what? We could really use a hometown hero to add to Elias Pettersson's line.
Yeah. At least the players are aware of their own limitations. You got to respect that.
Respect the tank, the tank that only the players have engineered. That would be one hell of a story. Just JT Miller split the room like, guys, got to get more talent. to be able to have a big contract like mine on here. We got to have somebody cheap like Connor Bedard to pick up the reins a little bit. Poor Vancouver. I feel bad for them because I know what it's like Game Over Vancouver starting this thing. I know what it's like to start this way, but they're actually even worse than the Habs were last year. The Habs won their 6th game. Vancouver's now 0-7.
And on top of that, the Vancouver Canucks are just like painful right now. It's just painful. It's not like oh, pucks just aren't going in. This is an unmitigated disaster, and it's not going to get better anytime soon unless they get like a top 3 pick.
Oh God, I don't want to talk too much about Vancouver, but just Rock Smash in the chat says watch Vancouver get first overall and they draft Fantilli. I mean, listen, it's not a bad idea to draft Fantilli, but I feel like the fan response to ignoring hometown boy Connor Bedard at first overall, there'd be another riot in Vancouver. It would be a rough one. All right, so back to Caden Cooley a little bit, because, we talked about his physicality, and it's a weird situation because everyone, I think, expected when Cooley was coming in, him to be like this physically dominant player. And in a lot of ways he is, like along the boards, he's using his environment extremely well to protect the puck or cut off players on the forecheck, all that stuff. But then you've got Jack come in and completely dominate everybody physically and takes all the focus for physicality off of Cooley. But he's also playing on the third pair. Mitch, in your opinion, because obviously you brought up that Goalie's having to adjust his game because he can't just bully, 18-year-olds anymore. It's hard to do that to NHL players. But do you think he would be pushing the physical play a little bit more if he was in a more minor role? Would he be not overextending himself, but extending himself more, taking more risks than he is as a first pair or the first number 1D essentially right now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And of course, the other thing too is that Gooley is not playing he's not playing easy minutes at all. He doesn't get time off in the offensive zone either because the structure demands that you activate. And something that we've seen from Caden Cooley from the time he entered the WHL to now is that he loves to get into the play and he knows how to do it. He times it really well. He's very intelligent off puck. We saw it late in this game where he kind of crept down the weak side off an offensive zone faceoff win and nearly got a chance. And it's hard to do that because you're sprinting up and down the ice. It's also a lot more activation is a lot more mentally active than other phases of hockey where you're thinking to yourself, you're trying to read the play around you. It's not quite as ingrained as it is okay, you know how to backpedal and take away the middle. That's just something you've done a million times. Activation, there's a lot more variables to consider. So I'm sure part of it is just that, it's not just that he doesn't have the same advantages, but he's playing so much. And he's playing hard minutes, and he doesn't get any time off in the offensive end because he clearly wants to be a creator.
Yeah, surprisingly, I thought he was all over the ice tonight, and this was his lowest ice time since the Detroit game, the second lowest of the season, only 17 minutes, 17 seconds. I guess Jordan Harris was just thrown out there constantly tonight. He played almost half the game, 25 minutes, over 25 minutes. So interesting to watch that maybe they were trying to give Cooley a little bit of mental break after how much pressure is on him. But I'd like to see Harris continue to get to bigger minutes and maybe split a little bit of that stress, because over a whole season, I feel like that's a lot to put on Caden Cooley. And I know things will change a little bit when Mike Matheson comes back, but still, it's a lot.
Yeah, and Mike Matheson doesn't play easy minutes either. That's a guy who's involved in everything.
Yeah.
And if you're his defensive partner, you better be aware of that. So, also on the topic of Harris, he's a pretty bland, kind of boring player sometimes, kind of fades into the background a little bit, but he's low-key pretty solid already. He kind of understands where to position himself on the ice, where to be, how to move, how to get to the spots that he wants to. Defensively, he can be a little bit passive, but I like his very kind of proactive off-puck approach as well. He's never going to be exciting, but there's a real chance that the Canadiens might have a mid-pairing guy here in the future.
Yeah, and I think Caden Cooley being so strong and him and Savard taking those hefty minutes have allowed Harris to shine a lot this year. He's really, I think, expanded his game much more than I expected after watching him last year. Even in the preseason, I thought he was solid but unspectacular. But, we've talked about him a few times this year. He's been playing way more physical than we ever expected. How many times tonight was Jordan Harris the first guy in on the forecheck, which is great to see a guy use their skating ability from the back end, which is, and we haven't really seen that from a guy who's confident with the puck with the Canadiens for a very long time. Like, I guess you could say Jeff Petrie, but Petrie didn't really like to lead the rush, I find. He would go on an odd man rush, but he liked to lead from the back end and, pinch in and take a nice shot. But I love how aggressive Jordan Harris is, and obviously it plays into St. Louis' system to be that aggressive.
Yeah, and it's always this is what Canadiens hockey is going to be under Martin St. Louis. Activation, lots of cool stuff going straight down the middle, lots of weak side activation. Everyone is involved all the time. And it really blends well with how, say, a Cole Caufield plays and how Nick Suzuki thinks the game.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we're going to talk about Cole Caufield right away here, but first I want to tell everyone, if you're here and you're enjoying the show, please like the show on YouTube. It helps us grow. It helps people find us through the algorithm, and share this show on your socials. Share it right now. There's not enough people in here watching. We want more people. We got to talk to them. If you're a Habs fan and you like watching post-game content, well, here, it is an interactive show with great guests every single game you can log into. Chat with us. We'll shout you out on the show. Like 22 Paper Dolls, Kay, one of our most loyal viewers. Sarah Y is always here. Even fans of the other team. Lindsay's here, Wild fan. And Dennis, he's great. I miss Saku on Twitter. So there's lots of people we love here that come every game. Share the show. Let everybody know about it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places you get your podcasts. So, yeah, someone says bow down to the algorithm. Of course, we all bow to the algorithms on every social media website. This is the new normal of human interaction, unfortunately, but that's, what we're dealing with. All right, Cole Caufield, I thought had his worst game of the year. Last game against Dallas. He seemed to really be cut off physically and kind of struggled with the back and forth chaotic nature of the game in Montreal against the Dallas Stars. Sean Monahan as well, I thought really struggled. And Monahan, I thought was a little bit off in the first period, but got better as the game went on, and to the point where he started to look really good. But Caufield, both offensively and defensively, fantastic tonight. He had a last second defensive stick hold in, I think, the second period or maybe the third period, where he full on saved a goal. I think it was on Kaprizov too. It was a fantastic defensive play. And I was like, Cole Caufield did that? He makes some good plays, but it was very aware.
The other crazy thing about that entire sequence was that he was on Kaprizov man to man, and he followed him behind the net, called that he wasn't going to switch. And then Kaprizov does the heel to heel to slip away. Caufield hits the brakes. He covers. He gets back and forces Kaprizov to move with the puck. So it was the entire sequence of him kind of angling him, keeping him wide, and then matching his footwork along the boards that kind of set that up. Very impressive defensive display. And on top of that, another thing that's very cool about watching Cole Caufield these days is how much better he's along the boards than he used to be.
Yeah.
So he had this one great play where he faked that he was going to cut back one way and then quickly cut back the other way, and the guy just fell over and he cut to the inside. He had another one where he skated right down the boards, cut back, left the guy in his wake, created a chance. So he's learning that physicality in the NHL isn't just about trying to absorb contact. It's about, at the right moments, turning away from it, getting it on your back, and then trying to make a play to the inside. This is the type of stuff that we didn't see from him in college. And now he's adding in the NHL. That's a big step. That's very hard to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like you see those little hints of what Caufield could end up being. And, I don't want to say because they're both small, but, adding a little bit of that Brendan Gallagherism to his game, where the cutbacks, there was a point, I think in the third period, where he came in on the forecheck, or I think he was trying to chase down a loose puck with Jared Spurgeon, and Spurgeon kind of came in on him, and Caufield just shrugged him off and knocked him to the ground. I know Jared Spurgeon's, I think, the smallest defenseman in the NHL, but I think he's still bigger than Caufield, so he still has to punch up a little bit to make that play. So I love seeing that from Caufield, and obviously his goal, a little bit fluky for sure, but his little stutter step fooled the hell out of Marc-Andre Fleury on a night where he wasn't fooled often.
This ties. Okay, so I actually think this was a genius play, and I don't think it was luck. It might have deflected a little bit, There was one replay that looked like it deflected. Another one showed that it just kind of went straight underneath the defender's stick. I don't know if he was trying to shoot low or whatever, but it was actually a pretty genius play. So what he does is he comes up the boards the other way, facing the point. Then he cuts back because he knows that he can separate from that position. As he comes in, he gets the defender to reach out, and then he curls the puck in. The puck to the goalie looks like it's going far side. So Fleury, and this is right after Fleury, because again, Caufield is now going like straight down the boards. And so Fleury kind of steps out to the short side. Then Caufield shows that the puck is going far side. And then at the very end of the motion, the puck actually goes short side. So he kind of catches Fleury in this weird motion where he's kind of like leaning with his shoulder far side, but his feet are being dragged behind him. So, I mean, that every goal scorer gets deflection goals like that. And it's often the consequence of a very intelligent play preceding it, which Cole Caufield did. Like it wasn't a genius level play, but you don't see that too often, even in the NHL.
Yeah, it was those little moments of genius. It's almost savant like, right? And you see that from star level players, guys that have that offensive creativity. And, like, unfortunately, with the Montreal Canadiens, they have some good players, but I think that level of creativity is in relatively short supply right now. Obviously, the plethora of high-end draft picks that they've got over like last season and this season, we might see a lot more of that coming into it. But man, it's really something with Cole Caufield. All right, the other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight in this section is the power play, because it remains awful. I thought the last power play that they had, the one before, okay, so it wasn't the last power play they had, I think. The one before Chris Weidman was standing still at the blue line and got an interference call. They seemed to have back-to-back shifts where they actually had some pretty good passing, like some incisive passing, but they couldn't really get the puck to the middle and they weren't getting the shots off. They haven't really put it together yet. How much are you worried, about this power play figuring it out under Alex Burrows, and how much of it is just, they need to have more time together?
I think part of it is personnel. I also think, Suzuki, he likes to hunt the perfect play. And I think it was on the first power play of the game. He gains the zone and then just tries like a spinning pass to a guy who's covered. And it's like, you have a minute and a half to operate. Just gain the zone and work with it. Yeah. It was in that moment where I was like, hey, the power play is going to be bad again tonight. Because as soon as you see your guy on the power play starting to force plays like that, might as well just pack it in and turn every single one of them down. I think Cole Caufield, obviously the shooter. I think his playmaking on the power play is very good. He moves the puck effectively, he moves it at the right moments. I think Weidman goes from being too stationary to not using space at all. He won't use space. He won't like step in, draw, and then pass the puck. And he also, away from the puck, he intends to encroach on Caufield's space. So then basically he gets so close to Caufield that one penalty killer can take them both out of the sequence. Something that I would like to see them do, that I think we've seen it in spurts this season, maybe like once or twice, is having Cole Caufield take a sharp, be positioned closer to the goal line. So you still want him on the weak side, but you want him closer to the goal line because A, he can score goals from there. We've seen it at every single level. That man from sharp angles is like an automatic sometimes. It's ridiculous. Yep. And that's an area where penalty killers often aren't going to be tracking him as closely. And if there is a player who can get him that puck, it's Suzuki. Suzuki will be able to manipulate opponents and draw pressure towards him, pass through them. So I think it entirely, right now anyway, rests in the hands of Weidman, Caufield, and Suzuki to figure out how to make this work. And maybe Burrows can try to get Caufield moving downhill a little bit more, but it's just a lot of bad decisions compounding.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I talked about this, I think it was the last show with Aaron, that I wonder if Weidman is kind of told, because he's the only defenseman, to stay back a little bit and be a little bit more conservative at the point. But at this stage, I don't see what the point of that is, no pun intended. I feel like they just need to be really aggressive on the power play and live with the mistakes that happen, because it's not like they're competing this year. You can learn more from success, even if it comes with some bumps along the road, than just the complete morale destruction that is the power play right now. I feel like Weidman doesn't have the lateral speed that you need to be like that shifty guy at the point. Like in the modern power play, your defenseman or the guy at the back doesn't even really need to be a shooting threat anymore. I find like you're looking at a 1% to 3% shot from there anyway. You basically are there to hold the line and draw penalty killers out and like move guys side to side, right? Like you're a facilitator. You're not necessarily the commander that like Andrei Markov was back in the day. And I would like to see them try somebody else there just because Wideman seems to lack creativity and foot speed. And it just doesn't seem like a good combination. And also he's not great defensively. So if he makes a mistake, he's not great at covering either. I feel like Jordan Harris is probably the best option, even though he's not necessarily creative either. He's got that foot speed that can kind of make things happen and at least somebody move out of formation. It seems like the Montreal Canadiens for years now, like they get their formation and sometimes you have guys in the right spots, but nobody ever really changes spots unless it's to put people on the wrong side to shoot from. Like you would put Caufield where he can't take a one-timer. That'll happen because Caufield's looking for a space to find a lane. But other than that, like the bumper stays in the bumper, the defenseman stays up high. No chaos really happens, right? And you want that controlled chaos.
And it's very shocking when you watch them play up in the offensive zone at 5-on-5, where like they got a defenseman just skating straight down the middle of the ice. And then on the power play, everyone is just static and staying in the exact same spot. It doesn't make a ton of sense. And of course, with Wideman, his job from that entire thing is literally just to bring someone towards him, so then he can dish it to Caufield or Suzuki, who will then make the cross lane pass for the one-timer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's his entire thing. His entire thing, just bring a guy towards you, and he does not do it. Harris would be a good fit. He was never particularly good at doing that kind of stuff in college, but I think now he's probably a little bit more aware, a little bit more adaptable, and of course he'll move the puck like as good as anyone else. But I'd also be curious to see Caden Cooley in that position. Caden Cooley doesn't get a ton of love for his offensive instincts, which I think have always been in his game, but he's mobile. He's a legitimate shot threat from up there, and on top of that, he'll defer to his teammates just nonstop. He's not going to be taking any bad shots. He knows who's taking the shots on the power play. He'll step in, fake, move the puck back. We saw him do it with Edmonton last year. Like a lot of stuff that you would hope that the power play would be doing. And if Caden Cooley isn't doing it, then it's very clearly the fault of structure. And I mean, even Wideman does these things at 5-on-5. He just doesn't do them on the power play, which makes it all that more confusing.
Yeah, it is very, very hard to understand, especially that this is like a holdover power play that's been terrible for, man, it's been a long time that this power play has been terrible. The personnel has changed completely and it's still bad. And I feel like they have
two of the best junior and NCAA power play guys ever. Nick Suzuki just would tear people up in though, and Cole Caufield was like every other game he scores a power play goal. Like,
yeah. And now he only scores even strength. Like, yeah. I think, doesn't Caufield only have like, outside of the playoffs, I think like a handful of power play goals, like 2 or something like that. Maybe he scored a couple in overtime in his little 10-game stint. Let's see. No, 5 power play goals last year. So you've got 31 career goals in the regular season, 5 power play goals. I feel like he could have way more than that with a competent power play, right? It just doesn't make sense to be that low. At least twice that.
And even in Wisconsin, when they played him, so he couldn't take one-timers. He was on a strong side, so he'd have to fake out incoming pressure and then shoot it. Like, he was still scoring from there. Like, you can find a way to make Cole Caufield score goals. If you can't, you probably shouldn't be here, right? Like, yeah, that's what he does.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like his goals this season, you can see, like, they're not always those like big snipes or anything, right? They're just finding holes in goaltenders, like what he did tonight, the little creative move. Or he had one, I know it was a one-timer against, I believe, Toronto in the first game, and he just found the tiniest little hole above Murray's shoulder to go short side on a ridiculous angle. Like, you get him the puck with a shooting lane, and he's going to find a way to put that puck into the net. He is a natural goal scorer if ever there was one. So the Canadiens really, I mean, I guess they have a couple seasons to figure this out, but I feel like it's the one part of their game right now that isn't fun to watch. And if we could just get
good news.
Yeah, you have some
Connor
good
Bedard
news?
has learned how to score on the power play. Later last season, it was never his forte, but he's figured it out. So maybe if they just lose enough games, then get Connor Bedard, all the power play issues will go away.
Yeah, that does tend to happen. Oh man, Connor Bedard in a Montreal Canadiens jersey, I think would make everything of the last season and a bit more than worth it for this fan base. All right, one last thing that I wanted to talk about before we close it out is Jake Allen, who once again was spectacular tonight. I feel like the Dallas game was his first game this year where he was like a little bit off, but the Stars had a lot of like 10 bell chances too. But in this game, I started counting in the first period and into the second period how many times Brian Mudryk, who was on the play-by-play call for TSN, said backdoor as the puck was about to go right to Jake Allen. And I believe by the beginning of the second period, I got up to 7. And that's a lot of backdoor chances for a full game, let alone 22-ish minutes of play. Jake Allen obviously started the season playing incredible. And, obviously we don't expect him to play this great all season. But with this amount of pressure on him every game, how many games do you think he can play?
I have no idea. I don't know goalies, and I certainly don't know goalie game played. I mean, I'll say 55. He can play 55.
Yeah, I think that's going to be asking a lot, honestly. I think this is going to be a season where, unless he can really stay healthy, which I think is asking a lot of any goaltender who's going to be facing these kinds of shots and having to go side to side all the time, you know, uh, man, if he gets to 50, I'd almost be surprised. I feel like we might split 50-50 between him and Montembeault and maybe a spot of Primo at some point in there as well.
Yeah, it would be nice to see Caden Primo get some games in. I have no idea if Caden Primo is good anymore, but I remember watching him so closely in college and his first year in the A, and he was just a player who he developed at a shocking pace. Like he was a below average USHL goaltender who had like no real technical base. And then 1 year in college, and suddenly he's so refined comparatively to what he was, and he's making big stops. And it'd be nice to see him actually get some action, maybe post a few wins, have a few memorable performances. And of course, I think Montembeault, who was certainly a fun goalie, like there's no disputing he's entertaining to watch, but he's going to help the cause, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, although I will say I've been impressed with him so far this season. I know last year he played like half of his games injured. Like he had an injury to, I believe, his glove hand, and he may even have injured his blocker hand at some point as well. Like two hands couldn't like hold on to stuff, and he had to play because Allen was injured, Price was out, Primo was letting in like 8 goals a game on like 10 shots. It was just brutal. So they're like, Monty, you you gotta play injured. And he was like, okay. And like I remember every time he would let in a goal, just he'd pull up his mask and take a drink, and the look on his face was just deer in headlights. He was struggling, but I think so far this year he's been solid. So good for him. I hope he has a better year than last year, just because it's a tough job. But Caden Primo last year, I feel like we saw the absolute worst of him, and then he went down to the Laval Rocket for the playoffs, and we saw the absolute best of him. And so far this season, he has a 9-1-6 in 3 games for the Rocket, but a little bit inconsistent. I guess his first game, he kind of got lit up a little bit, but good since then. Not enough starts so far, I guess, to really figure out how he's playing, but 9-1-6 ain't too bad. It's a good start, I guess.
Hopefully he keeps it up.
Yeah, I mean, he has some runway. The organization doesn't really have much in terms of goaltenders. He can figure something out to get some starts in the NHL, get some money in his pocket for sure. But I would assume, just based on Jeff Gorton's history of finding goaltenders, that the Canadians will find some diamond in the rough somewhere.
Oh, they have one. Jakub Dobish. Just
Yeah?
holy moly. That guy he's exciting. He's great. I think in 8 college games so far, he's a 931. Okay, he's no Devin Levi, but like, come on, that's pretty good, especially for Ohio State University. And last year, he was 934.
Oh,
So this
wow.
is clearly one of the best goalies in NCAA hockey right now. I think he won Big Ten Goalie of the Year, if I remember. Or at the very least, he was on the first All-Star team as a rookie. So like, very, very exciting. And then Emmett Croto. Not the most beautiful goalie to watch, but he has really good tools. Big guy, quite mobile. His skating is pretty good for a USHL goalie, especially for a 6'4" USHL goalie. The skating is often something that comes a little bit later. And so he's a guy to watch. He's Clarkson bound next season.
All right, so they got some guys in the organization already to keep an eye on. There was a couple fun comments here on Monty. There's somebody I missed it there. I lost it. All right. Somebody saying he's a muffin. Everybody loves Montembeau in the chat. I think it was Rock Smasher said the $1 million deal that he got, the extension must have been like reparations for having to deal with last season, which, fair. It was a rough one for everyone, but I feel like the goalies, especially last year, really, really got a rough ride. All right. I think I've kept you long enough, Mitch. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Thanks for everyone for joining us here. Obviously, it's a lot more fun this year than last year, but there's still going to be a lot of losses. So stick with us through them. And before we close out, Mitch, tell everybody where they can find your work.
You can follow me at Mitchell Brown on Twitter.com. I just tweeted out about Owen Beck's 9-point weekend. Actually, I think that was a few days ago, but I'm sick right now, so I have no sense of time. But anyway, he had a great weekend. I'll be posting some cool Lane Hudson stuff eventually too. And then head to epringside.com. We have all sorts of cool stuff. And we have a draft retrospective series come out. Talk about how Elmer Soderblom became the internet's heartthrob hockey sensation. And how about Connor McDavid was actually probably not as good in junior as you think. So lots of cool stuff coming. I implore you to check it all out, please. I need to eat.
All right, everybody, feed Mitch. And if you can, I will post in the chat in the description of this video and in the podcast, Mitch's Patreon, which he uses to support him tracking all of his prospect data. Seriously, the information that he provides is invaluable. It's amazing to see what junior kids are up to and try to relate some of their skills to NHL player skills and where they can project as. Mitch is one of the only people doing this kind of work. It's incredible. So if you have the means to support it and you want to see some cool stuff, please support Mitch there as well as Elite Prospects. Thanks for coming out, everyone. And we will see you on Thursday.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a great time as usual.
My pleasure, man.